So I'm seeing the gallery now with a few faces. So welcome everybody. Hi, thanks for coming back. Delphine, hi, good to see you. Thanks for
Hello,
joining.
nice to see you too.
Great to have you. And we have people here today from lots of different countries. Um, so I think we can't turn on the cameras. Oftentimes the network is not good enough to turn the cameras on. So that's okay. So let's go back to just a quick introduction of the program today. So today we'll be talking about, okay, so first we'll go over some quick guidelines. So every week we meet at the same time, Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is actually the last week of our 6 initial workshops. And it's the same Zoom link, so I hope you have no problem logging in today. When you're not speaking, please mute yourself so that we can make the space friendly and accommodating for everybody. And today we are asking you to please add the name of your country after your name in Zoom so that we can quickly see where everybody is from and also put you into breakaway rooms very quickly later. So to do this, it's not hard, but you have to follow some instructions. So if you can go to your name and go to the upper right-hand corner of your box and click on those three dots on the upper right-hand corner of your box, you can see where it says rename yourself, and you can add the name of your country after your name. And it's okay if you can't do it. We'll be doing it for you after a few minutes. But if you can do it yourself, even better. Okay, please keep your questions and your responses direct and concise. This makes the space, again, learning friendly for everybody. And we're all here. Doesn't matter where we're from. We're all here to listen, to learn, and to share and to grow. We all have something that is important and something also to learn from somebody else who has something important to share. So we're all experts, but we're all learners at the same time. Next slide, please, Gabriel. So I want to quickly remind you that this course has 3 modules. We are now in module 1, where we have 6 workshops. Then we will have another period of time that's about 1 month long, in which you can work independently on a professional action plan. And I'll show you that in just a moment, what that looks like. And this action plan is part of the certification. So if you want to get a certificate for joining these workshops and for taking part in the learning, you have to do this action plan. You have to submit it, as well as any other work that you didn't submit for the 6 workshops. And the plan will be practical for you. It will not be something that is abstract or disengaged from your normal work agenda. It's supposed to be integrated in your normal work for 2024. And then we'll have a module 3 next year. We'll tell you the dates, but it'll probably start in January, mid-January, where you can present your action plans for feedback from this learning group. So I'm going to share my screen for just a moment to show you what that looks like. So just 1 second, please. Okay, so I just went over quickly the action plan. Let me quickly show you what that looks like. So I'll be sharing this link with everybody. Everything's in the resource folder already. But in this, this is going to be the assignment, the instructions. And it's been announced already, but this is a quick reminder and a show of the template. So by Wednesday, January 10th, we'd like for you to submit a short professional action plan that summarizes your commitments to prioritize gender responsiveness in your departments and your regular work agenda in 2024. So it's not supposed to be something that is an extra task. It's supposed to be integrated in your normal work that you would already do for the year 2024, no matter what you do in the ministry or in your organization. And you can use this template here in this same document, and you'll have to download it to fill it in and send it back to us. So this is the template, and you can read it in more detail later, but these are the headings on the top for you to reflect on And to fill in, there are 3 spaces here where you can put about 3 actions, but you don't have to put down 3 actions. You can even just do 1 action and then describe it in depth. Or if you're already doing some work in this area, you could maybe put down more than 3 actions. It really depends on you. But the key idea here is to follow this tip, to identify just a few achievable actions that you yourself can complete in your own area of immediate responsibility. So we're not writing a list of policy recommendations in general for our governments to do, some aspirational goal. It's meant to be something that you can yourself do. Doesn't matter how small the action looks. If you really think about the action that you can take, you'll realize that you have a lot of power to do something, even within your scope in your own role. So be clear, be specific, and be realistic. Your actions might look like this. It might be holding a meeting with your superiors about what you've learned in these workshops. It might look like organizing a training. And one of the topics that we've done for a level of stakeholders in your ministry, or even beyond that, it might look like a training, or it could even be interviews with current practitioners in gender responsive programs in your country. Maybe you need to gather more information from some of those people who are actually working in this area. Maybe you need to know for yourself. So you might want to conduct interviews or do some research with them on what's happening. So your actions can look like many different things. These are just a couple of examples, but it's okay to start small and then to build your way up. You don't have to begin very large. We've seen that in the past when we've done this, sometimes people make very big aspirational plans for themselves, like I'm going to do a week-long training, and then it doesn't happen because there are a lot of logistics to it, and maybe the commitment is, it's hard to commit to that. Maybe there are resources involved that you don't have. It's okay to start small with this action plan and then to build on things later. Okay, so the action plan here will give you these prompts for you to fill out, such as what is the action that you will take? When will you take this action? Actually, when will you complete this action? Not when will you start this, but ideally, when do you want to complete this action? How does this action align with your regular work plan? What are you already doing? And how does this fit into what you're already doing? Again, this is not supposed to be an extra, entirely new thing for you. You're already here for a reason. You want to learn more about gender responsive education. That's a great first step. So how does it fit into what you are already interested in doing and doing? And then what specific gender equity issue in your country are you addressing through this action? And this is a very important column. What kind of tools or knowledge resources are you going to be using to complete this action? We hope that you go back to the course resource pack. The resource pack is that folder, you can click on it, that shows you all the resources from these workshops. There's the definitions on what is gender equity, etc. There is the GES, the Gender Equity and Education Snapshot tool that we'll show you again later on today, that has the indicators and the data sources for measuring equity in your own country. There are also policy briefs there. There are lots of materials. So we'd like for you to link back to something from that resource pack, and not just try to Google something, but try to go back to what we've already shared in that resource pack. Of course, you can Google, that's also okay. You can get your own resources, but the idea is to start with what you already have come into contact with so that we can then help you if you have any questions. We can refer you back to one of those tools. Okay, specific stakeholders you need to conduct or consult to do your action. And then what kind of challenges you might face. This is important for troubleshooting in case you face some resistance, or in case you yourself run up against the end of your knowledge, if you need to know more information. And then reflection. This last column is after you've done the action, you can reflect here starting in January or in February. You can start reflecting on how it went for you. So there is that we'll expect from you if you want to earn the certificate, and we hope that you all do by January 10th. If you need another day, that's okay, but we're hoping to have all of these by the middle of January at the very latest. So we're saying January 10th so that we have time to give you feedback. One other thing I want to share with you is that we're hoping that you also share a country example. So this was shared with you a couple of sessions back. We have not gotten your worksheets yet. So this is, I'm going to be that teacher that we need to have your worksheets for one of the required tasks that we asked you to do a couple of sessions back. So I'm reminding you again, and by Thursday of this week, so December 7th, we are looking to get your the example of a program from your country. So please do download this and fill this out and send it back to us. We can go over this again later on if we have any questions, but it's already been shared with you. So please think about anything in your country, any program, even curriculum, intervention that in some way is gender responsive. It is responding to the gender inequities in your context. And just describe it here on this short worksheet. Describe the basic details of it, and then send it back to us. This will become the basis of the ongoing exchange that we do together. We're learning from each other. Okay, Gabriel, could you share the last slide, and then I'm almost done with my section, and we'll hand over to Mercy in just a moment. Okay, so the last one, please, the last previous slide, Gabriel. I know I've been talking a lot, I'm almost done. So again, if you miss a session, this was already emailed to you, but as a quick reminder, if you miss a session, you still can attend all the sessions in the sense that you can make up for what you've missed. And you have to do that if you want to earn a certificate. You can watch the Zoom recording of the session. You can complete any of the work that was assigned, such as the worksheet that I just showed you on sharing an example of a program from your country. And you can email us a short written summary of your responses to the questions that were asked in the session. And you can see those questions on both the recording and the PowerPoint slides. So we're hoping that you do this if you've missed a session so that you can still get a certificate. And the next slide, my last one, I'll share these links with you. But again, we have the WhatsApp group for those of you that want to stay connected. We have a resource pack, which I'll share with you too, again. And we have a parking lot for you to add your ongoing questions and ideas for this course. That's it for me. I know I've said a lot of things, but I'll be emailing everybody with what I've said. Next slide, please, Gabriel. I'd like to hand over now to our wonderful course facilitator, Ms. Mercy Mupavayanda. So over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I had my camera on. I'm sure a few people saw me before. I'm going to switch it off to manage my connectivity. But hello, everyone, and welcome back to our participants, and welcome to new participants, and again, welcome to our guest speakers. Thank you so much for joining in today. And thank you so much, Marianne, for going over those very, very important details and also assignments that we'll all work together for us to end up with a community of practice. So thank you very much. May I have my first slide, please? Or rather the second one. Yes. So today is session 5, and I really want to thank most of you. You've been very, very dedicated. You've showed up each week. You've given up at least 4 hours and even more than 4 hours sometimes when our sessions run over a little bit. So thank you very much for being dedicated to this work on gender equality, which is really about the human rights of not just the girls and boys, but of everyone. So today's session is about the cost and benefit of education programs, or rather the cost of not educating girls, as we can think about it like that, or also think about it as the benefit of actually educating girls. And I know that in countries like Lesotho, our participants have really been wanting us to discuss the fact that in Lesotho, it's actually the boys that are disengaged from education. So I hope that maybe even our guest speakers may be able to answer some of those questions today. Thank you. May I have the next slide? So before we jump into our session 5, as usual, we are going to have a recap of session 4. If you still remember, we were examining gender responsive education sector planning, which we call GRESP in short, as well as resource mobilization strategies so we can hardwire gender in the education sector. And as you may recall, we had two very excellent presenters that came and spoke to us and also showed us the gender tool that we are going to look at much later at the end of the session. So our learning outcomes for last week, we were hoping that our participants would examine and gain essential understanding of gender responsive education sector planning, as I've already said, as well as strategies and ways, discussing amongst participants, amongst yourself and amongst each of us as a group, discussing strategies of how we can mobilize resources to be able to plan and to execute these programs that we've been talking about from session 1. Thank you. Next slide. Yes. So the key terms for last week, the first one was the GRESP, and the second one was also resource mobilization strategies. So no mystery there. And our key questions were, what are some of the principles and practices of developing and implementing GRESP? So as you may recall, our guest speakers who actually do this work took us through the principles and practices. And as Marianne may have emailed you, or she'll email you later, you'll see that I actually drew up a quick survey for which you can do in your own time to remind, with survey questions, to remind yourselves of the principles and practices of developing and implementing GRESP in different contexts where you find yourself. And we were also hoping, and I'm sure we did to a very large extent, answer the question, what are some of the effective resource mobilization strategies for GRESP? And also what we wanted our participants to think about was whether you can identify various system levels where GRESP takes place in your own country or in your own Ministry of Education, and also whether you are able to identify people you consider, institutions, individuals, communities that you may see as important stakeholders at each level of GRESP. Thank you. Yes. So some of the participant comments and feedback we received after session 4, someone said it was a critical session as data is largely supportive of gender disaggregation, but not gender transformative. So we must look outside of EMIS, which is Education Management Information Systems, for such data. And then someone from Uganda pointed out that they are currently promoting gender and equity budgeting in all sectors. And someone said that they think that they need more time to deep dive into case studies. And I take this to mean that they are talking about the allocated time during our 2-hour session. So what we've been trying to do since session, I think 1 or 2, is to send you the case studies prior to coming to the session, because we are aware that the session is very short, so we can't have maybe 30 minutes or so to sit in groups and discuss. So we were hoping that, we realized that you are very busy, but we were hoping that you would give yourself maybe 5 to 10 minutes to just browse through the case studies, so that when you come onto the online platform, we can then go into different Zoom discussion groups and look at the case studies as a second step after we would have looked at it in our individual capacities. Thank you. Next slide. Yes. Another participant said, I learned that GREST can be used as a tool to enhance gender equality in education, and that there are measures that can be taken to prohibit the digital divide in education for girls in communities. For example, bringing equal access to digital technology or infrastructure that include computers and internet to schools. And lastly, I learned that education systems need to be gender responsive by design to close the gender gap. Thank you. Yes. And the last comment that we published is, I think our issue in Namibia is not having a gender unit in the Ministry of Education, an issue of human resources mainly for gender education. And also most programs addressing gender are run from different divisions without monitoring for impacts, etc. Thank you very much. So at this point, I would like to, maybe we can go back to that slide, to the previous slide. At this point, the previous one, yes. I want to engage our participants. I know we always encourage you to put your comments, your observations, your questions, your input in the chat box, because there is never enough time to call upon different numbers of people to speak online. But I want to take this opportunity maybe to invite 2 or 3 of our participants whose comments were not published, are not published in the slides, to just share what they took away from the session last week, or what are some of the key terms that you learned, or anything that you think you learned, or something else you would like us to cover. Greetings. I see Sekelekele is saying greetings from Lesotho. I see that we actually have about 3 or more participants from Lesotho today. Thank you so much for joining. Does anyone want to share their comment from, any comment from last week before we continue? Any pressing observation or something you need explained before we carry on? I don't see anyone on my screen unless I'm missing something. I will take that as a cue to continue, but it's very unusual because I know there's usually people clamoring to speak. Yes, is that you, Petros?
Yes, can I try?
Yes, please, go ahead, sir. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mercy. I don't want to go through every detail, but to my understanding, the summary of last week is that girls' education is improving in our country, in many countries, but still is on its lower level of education. So, according to the World Bank, and even in our countries, girls are coming to school, but the quality issue needs intervention. So that the summary is that in policies and education strategies in our plans, we need to consider girls' education as well, as it needs further efforts from countries. So as an expert, I'm planning to influence any plan to include the issue of girls and female teachers. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Petros. Thank you so much, Petros, all the way from Ethiopia. Thank you so much. As you heard him saying that the issue of quality is also is also a challenge, even when girls and boys do get to school. Is there any other comment before we carry on, or question or observation, or key terms learned from last week? I know that we were speaking with Miss Anne from Kenya over the weekend on email, and she is interested in taking a deeper dive into the indicators, you know, for sector planning as well as implementation. So we have set aside time at the end of the session where we are going to look again at the gender tool which was shared with us, and we'll look at the different indicators as much as time will permit us. So I'm not seeing any hands, so I think I will proceed to the next slide. Please feel free to keep sharing your comments, your questions, your observations in the chat box. As you have been seeing in the last few weeks, that we always try and integrate all the comments and questions that you give to us into our session facilitation, and also the bigger questions, we answer them in the parking lot. If you've been visiting our parking lot, you'll see that we've attended to at least 99% of the questions. So today, as I indicated earlier, we are measuring the benefits of educating girls, and also looking at the cost versus benefit of educational programs for girls. And as I said earlier in our outcomes, that I mean, it may seem odd that we even have to talk about, you know, what benefit are we going to be getting from educating girls, because from a human rights perspective, you know, they are people, they deserve to get the same access to education and other, you know, other basic needs, just as everyone else. But we do this, you know, as researchers, as scholars, as development workers, to be able, you know, to maybe appeal to sectors of our society where this kind of approach, maybe we are taking this kind of approach to see if we can reach everyone and bring them to the table to talk about not only investing in girls because of human rights, but also really looking at what is the cost, not only at national levels, but at global levels, and what type of futures are we looking at if in most countries, for example, in Sub-Saharan Africa, I know that girls and women make up 51% of the population. So if we are leaving a very huge percentage of the 51% behind, what does that actually mean? What kind of futures are we creating? Are those futures going to be sustainable? So in terms of learning outcomes, we are going to start building an understanding of these costs versus benefits of not educating girls and also educating them. And as I've already said, we are looking beyond the individual human rights violations of learners to the socio-economic and, if you like, the political, cultural effects at a global scale. Thank you very much. Yes. So the key terms which I think that our guest speakers are going to may delve into when they start speaking, you know, because we took these key terms out of one of the readings that we gave you on the very high cost of not educating girls, is the earnings and standard of living, health, nutrition, and well-being, agency and decision-making, child marriage and early childbearing, fertility and population growth, social capital, and institutions. So we'll see how much our guest speakers are going to dive into, and whatever is left behind, we can also discuss later as a group. But for now, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Marianne, to introduce our first guest speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mercy, for that overview. And I'm seeing more people are joining now every minute. I'd like to ask our first speaker to join to begin. Dr. Quinton Woden is the director of UNESCO ICPA, and UNESCO ICPA is the facilitator of these workshops. Quinton comes with almost 15 years of experience at the World Bank, and he's really an expert on this topic. So we're happy to have him joining us for this particular presentation. Over to you, Quinton, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Marianne. Yes, I'm a World Bank survivor, 24 years actually. So I think that some of you may have heard some of what I will present today, because I shared some of this material to 2 meetings of CFA, of the focal points, and then some of this I shared also at the meeting for KIC's inception of phase 2. But I'll try to make sure that I am not repeating too much, and I will go a bit faster on some things and introduce a few new elements. So I think I have 20 minutes, so I should finish by 3:58 latest. So can you go to the next slide, Gabriel? Thank you. So at ICPA, together with the African Union Center for Girls Education, CFA, we are going to launch a report on January 31st on girls' education. It's going to be called the Africa Teachers Report. The plan is to do 1 report on teachers every year, and the first one is on girls' education. Now, this report will have 2 objectives. Sometimes we will focus on teachers. Back, Gabriel, I'll tell you when you have to move. Sometimes we will focus on teachers as the solution to a problem. And this is the objective for the first Africa Teachers Report on girls' education. Other time, we'll focus on specific policy issues related to teachers. That might be teacher shortages, professional standards and competencies, could be training, it could be working conditions, could be many different things. So next slide. The first slide will be, the first report will be on girls' education. Now, within the context of what we are doing today, I just wanted to say 1 or 2 things about cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis is to compare the benefits of a program with the cost of a program. And I think you're all familiar with the basic idea. If you're interested in the formulas and how this is done in practice, I'm happy to show that to you individually after today. But you need to assess the costs of an intervention. No, Gabriel, I will tell you when we move. So we need to assess the costs of an intervention. We need to assess the future benefits, and I'll spend quite a bit of time on benefits today. Then there is what is called the discount rate. And the idea is that the benefit a few years from now, or 20 or 40 years from now, is not valued in the same way as a benefit today. The further away the benefit, the lower the value of the benefit. And then you can get various measures of cost-benefit analysis. I mean, one measure that people use is what is called the internal rate of return. A simpler measure is the benefit-to-cost ratio. You need exactly the same data to compute both, but the benefit-to-cost ratio is how many dollar, if you will, of benefits do you have from an intervention in today's value compared to the cost of the intervention. And typically, you need the benefit-to-cost ratio of at least 3. Much better if you have 4, 5, 6. Some interventions have benefit-to-cost ratio of 15. And our moderator made an allusion to human rights. Of course, girls' education is a human right, but that does not get you far enough. The issue is that most governments in Africa are not able to provide services of quality in many different areas to the population. And then the question arises, I mean, why would you promote more one intervention versus another? Why do something in education versus health? And if you are in education, why do girls' education versus boys' education, or versus many other things? And those benefit-to-cost ratio, I think, are important to try to figure out, given fairly limited resources in many cases, where to invest in. All right, next slide. So the slide was already in a way mentioned by our moderator, by Mercy. We did some analysis, or I did some analysis a few years back at the World Bank trying to measure the benefits of educating girls in a range of areas. These are earnings and standards of living, child marriage, early childbearing, fertility, health, agency, and then social capital. I'm not going to be able today to go through all of those, and I've shared some of that information with you, but I want to give you a few pointers. Next slide. So the first benefit is in terms of lifetime earnings, and that's the same for boys and girls. There is virtually no difference. I mean, there are some, but not large. This slide, which I'm not going to explain in details, makes a simple point. It is that when you look at the wealth of nations, you can have three categories of wealth, essentially. You have produced capital, think about roads, factories, and so on. You have natural capital, think about land, water, oil, minerals. And then you have human capital, people, right? And the concept of capital is an asset that you have that can generate future revenues. So actually, the wealth of nations is what helps you produce GDP, income, consumption, so on. And what you have in almost all countries, not all, but most, is that human capital, that means people, represents 2/3 of the assets of a country to produce future income. That's very important. And human capital is measured as the value today of the future earnings of the current labor force. Now, these estimates of human capital are based on what we call wage regressions, and that's the next slide, with an example for Uganda. What you have on this slide is essentially the benefit at the margin, controlling for other things, that a higher level of education gives you, right? And you can see, and it's very obvious, the more educated you are, the higher the wage. But you can see a few things there. You can see that the benefits from primary education are very low compared to no education at all. It's maybe 20, 30%. The returns to education start to be large when you have secondary and especially tertiary education. And those types of analysis is the bread and butter of what you use to compute the core benefits of investing in boys or in girls' education, right? It is how much more earnings will a person have. Now, that's a limited view, but that's an important view. The question then is there something else, right? And we can go to the next slide. And yes, there is something else, which is especially important for girls more than boys, right? Again, as I mentioned, the returns to education for boys and girls are very similar, right? Now, what you have in addition for girls is a link with child marriage and early childbearing. Now, this is a map of Nigeria where you see very different levels of lower secondary completion rates. And what you have on the left is the estimates of the completion rates for primary, lower secondary, and upper secondary, with different age groups that are a bit older than a normal age for finishing those levels. And you can see that what is in orange on the left, that's 2018, is a bit better than what is in blue, that's 2013. So there has been a little bit of progress. And that's the case in many African countries. But the progress is very slow. And that's also the case in most African countries. Now, what's important is the next one with that specific link, next slide, with child marriage. So here, you have estimates of child marriage. And you can see again with the graph on the left that the orange bars for 2018 are a little bit below the 2013 blue bars. That means that there is progress because there is less child marriage over time between those two surveys. What you have for the map is a complete reverse of the previous map. You have higher levels of child marriage in the northern part of the country versus the south, right? So again, some progress, but still limited progress over time. Now, the next slide gives you the correlation between those two. Look at the graph on the left, right? And there you have the child marriage on the horizontal axis, and you have lower secondary school completion on the vertical axis, and you have a scatter plot. Each dot is a state. You can see that the relationship is extremely strong. And what that means is practically that child marriage is a key driver of lower secondary completion, and lower secondary completion is a key driver of preventing child marriage, right? So there's a strong relationship. And I know there were a few questions, but I'll look at the questions at the end of the presentation. The next slide is early childbearing, which matters a lot for health reasons, right? child marriage is having a child before, child marriage is marrying before the age of 18, while early childbearing is having a child before the age of 18. And you can see here that there is, again, a little bit of progress, right? Nationally, the orange bar is a bit lower than the blue bar. So there was a bit less early childbearing in 2018 than 2013. And you can see that the map for early childbearing is very similar to the map for child marriage. And that's indeed the case. And the next slide shows you on the right graph the relationships between states, again, a scatter plot between child marriage and early childbearing. And what you can say for Nigeria, and it's the case for almost all African countries, but not all. For example, Liberia is different, Cote d'Ivoire is different, and so on. But typically, you can actually show that most cases of early childbearing are due to child marriage. That means that most birth of a child to a mother younger than 18 are due to the fact that the mother was married before the age of 18. Now, this then has a number of consequences, and the next slide is part of those consequences. So the basic argument in terms of the benefits is that you not only have wage benefits from educating girls, but if you educate girls, you're going to make sure that they don't get married to a large extent, which in turn is going to reduce early childbearing, right? So I've already talked about two benefits, the benefits related to wages and the benefits related to preventing child marriage and early pregnancies. Now, the third one is about fertility. And what you have here on the left is a graph showing population growth rate and fertility. Total fertility is the number of children that women have over their lifetime. And what you can see is that even though, this is again Nigeria, total fertility in blue on the left went down over the years, the population growth rate has not gone down. And the reason why is because you have a very large number of women in age of childbearing. And so there's a bit of a time lag between the decrease in fertility and the decrease in population growth. But what matters more is the graph on the right. And this shows you the percentage reduction that you would have in total fertility if you achieved universal secondary educations for girls in Nigeria, right? And in blue, you have the benefit from the girls being better educated, and in orange, you have the benefit from almost ending child marriage if all girls go to the upper secondary school and complete secondary schooling. You can actually show that if they do that, it's very unlikely that they get married. And so what you can see here is that you would reduce fertility rates by 20-25%, depending on the year, if you give universal secondary education for girls. Now, importantly, the goal is not to reduce fertility. The goal is to enable women to have the number of children that they want to have. And in most African countries, most women have more children than they want to have. And education can help them manage their fertility, and that would reduce population growth, which would have a wide range of additional economic benefits apart from the direct benefits in the labor market of having a better education. Now, the next slide is about one of the health benefits, and I won't go into details, but you can show that if a child is born of a mother who was younger than 18 when the child was born, that's early childbearing, right, or early childbirth, that is dangerous for both the mother. You have high rates of maternal mortality when girls give birth very early. It's also dangerous for the child. And you can show that you have higher rates of under 5 mortality and higher rates of under 5 stunting, malnutrition, when a child is born of a very young mother. And this again gives you the benefit from universal education for girls in terms of reducing the levels of under 5 mortality in this case, and the example is for Nigeria. And again, universal secondary education for girls would help cut under 5 mortality by 20-25%, depending on the year. Now, there are other benefits that I used to analyze, and by the way, we are assessing all of this for the Africa Teachers Report that I mentioned before, for more countries with more recent data, and this will be the first part of the report. The other benefits relate to reducing violence in the households, increasing agency for women. There are also benefits for social capital, but I can answer those in the Q&A later on. Now, the next slide, I think we move towards, so what do you do about it? And as some of you heard me mention, I've said in previous occasions that if you look at the literature, it focuses on incentives for keeping adolescent girls in schools at the secondary level. That works, economic incentives. Some other programs work less well. But the key argument we want to make in that Africa Teachers report that will be released at the end of January is that we need to invest much earlier. And the next slide, I think, starts to make that argument. Well, just go to the next one, actually, because I'm a bit late in time. This is data for Niger, but we have it for many countries. When you look at the reasons why girls and boys drop out of school, you find that often the main reason is a lack of learning. And many of you may have learned about learning poverty, which is the ability to read and understand a simple text by age 10. In Africa, 9 in 10 children are learning poor. They're not able to read and understand a simple text, and that leads them to drop out. And so the basic argument is that if we were able to improve learning in primary school, we would have much fewer children dropping out, including girls, and that would lead then to a much higher completion rate for upper secondary. And so instead of just looking at what works to keep girls in schools at the upper secondary level, we have to look at what works to make sure that we have a higher share of the girls reaching that level. And the key is really to improve learning. And if you ask me, I can provide you more data on that, but it's really important. Now, the next slide is about PASEC data, which is for West Africa. This actually measures what's the benefit from different types of interventions, right? If the child learns in his or her own language, you have a gain in learning, right? If we have a female teacher and a female principal, you have a gain in learning. If the teacher has a professional diploma, has a proper pre-service training as well, you have a gain in learning. If you have large class sizes, I mean, you know, in many countries, you can have 80, 100 kids in one classroom, then you have a loss in learning. And there are many other effects like that. And so one of the things that we are going to do, and we got a grant from the Gates Foundation to do that, is to do that analysis in even more details, and then try to see what's the cost and what's the benefit of different interventions that could improve learning, and that would lead to also higher educational attainment. And I can tell you, for example, that having more female teachers and more female principals, in most countries, we have a very short share, a very small share of female teachers at the secondary level, and we have even fewer principals. Doing that, having programs, for example, to provide incentives for women to go into teaching would have huge benefits and very high benefit to cost ratio. Because the cost is to train them, because once they are trained, they will be paid like other teachers, and so there's no additional cost versus having a male teachers, just that there's an additional benefit. Now, the next slide is just showing data. I won't go in details. This is for West Africa, another survey, where you can see that women account for 10, 15% of teachers at the secondary level. There would be a big benefit for learning. There would also be a benefit for role models, right? I mean, because more women teachers would actually help show that there is a value for the parents and for the girls of staying in schools, because they could become teachers themselves, and then there's that whole positive loop that comes in from this. Now, I'm almost done. I have, I think, 3 or 4 more minutes. And the next slide shifts to something a little bit different. We were at the FAWE conference about a week or 2 ago, and we released a new gender responsive pedagogy e-learning course, right? So I mentioned the importance of investing in female teachers or principals. I mentioned some other things that can improve learning and how better learning leads to better educational attainment. It's also important to tackle the issue of gender inequality more broadly, and schools are a wonderful entry point. This is a quote from one of the award winners from the African Union Continental Best Teacher Award, saying that we need to embrace educational technology. This is one of the things she would have done earlier if she could have. And we hope, and that's the next slide, that some of the e-learning courses that we will provide will help. So we released 2 weeks ago at the FAWE conference in English, a two-part course on gender-responsive pedagogy. It's self-paced, it's narrated, it's interactive, so it's integrated. You have quizzes, you have videos, you have pop-ups, not pop-ups, pop-ups, there's a typo there. We have two courses, so that each course is, just takes a few hours, and then you get a certificate, if that's important to you, upon completion for each module and then overall completion. The next slide tells you the structure of the course. The part one or the course one is about teaching and learning. There is 2 units on gender and human rights, and then the rest of the units in the first course are about gender responsiveness in school and management systems, learner-centered pedagogy, language use, lesson planning, teaching and learning material, and even how to set up a classroom. And then the second part, it's titled Gender-Based Violence. It's a bit broader. There's a unit on sexual and reproductive health, then one on gender-based violence, and then engaging stakeholders, and the last one is about broader design. Now, that will also be part, and so next slide, of the Africa Teachers Report. That's my last slide. And I have 2 comments left. I am exactly at 20 minutes. One is that if it's important for your country to have a country report on gender inequality in and through education and the role of teachers, which would mimic what I presented here, the first part about the benefits and a bit of the costs, and the second part about how you go about it, what kind of interventions make sense, we can provide that for you. The second thing I want to say, and that's my last word, the gender responsive pedagogy course is available on our website, and I can ask Marianne to send that to all of you. You can take it. We can adapt the course to your country if this matters to you. So say Nigeria, you want to have a bit more background on Nigeria and you want to showcase interesting things, to some extent we can adapt the course. Or Namibia, we need to actually do something more about boys, maybe we can adapt the course. That's a discussion we need to have, but we want you to be able to use those courses in the continuous professional development that is provided in your country. It's going to be completely free. You can have it on your platform or we can do it on our platform. I just want to say that this is available and we are happy to work with you on the course to adapt it or to do country reports like the Africa one we will launch soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quentin. I don't know how you did it, but it is on time, exactly on time. Thank you. That was a very rich presentation. We're going to be sharing it with everybody very soon. So the resource pack that I shared at the beginning of this meeting, that is being updated almost on a daily basis with the presentations, the recordings, the materials. So it will be shared there, and we would encourage you to have a look at those the slides because there's a lot of information there. And we'll also get a chance during breakaway rooms a little bit later to maybe unpack some of that. I'm wondering, oh yes, I see, Quentin, you have your hand up. Yes.
I forgot to say one thing, sorry, 1 minute. You mentioned that you were trying to see whether people could share interesting experiences, right, of things that are happening in their country. We would love to see this, including for the Africa Teachers Report that I mentioned, right? If you get something interesting from you, I mean, a box about something innovative, like we have a speaker from the Gambia that follows me, and I met your minister at the UNESCO General Conference. She explained to me a wonderful program that you had to provide better qualified teachers with incentives in rural areas. And it had actually a strong gender dimension in terms of who picked up those benefits and went. We want to show those experiences and innovations that you have in your countries. So please do not hesitate to send that, but before Christmas, please, so that we still have the time to integrate it in the report that comes out on the 31st of January. Thank you.
Yes, exactly, Quentin. So participants, that's another reminder that we asked you several weeks back to share an example from your country of a gender responsive program. This is actually the best and maybe the most fundamental thing that you can do right now is to start thinking about what is already happening in your country. You might already have a lot of knowledge about this, or you might just be beginning to explore this area. So please send us back the worksheet that we gave you to fill out. It's not very, it won't take very long. It's just a matter of documenting what's already happening in your country. Just one program, one good program. And it is due by this Thursday, and it is part of the initial 6 workshops. If you have any questions about it, we're happy to help you with the worksheet. I'll just mention that. I think, what, Mercy, do you think we should do questions right now, or can we move to the next presenter? What would you prefer? That we stick to the original plan?
It depends. Quinton, are you going to be available after our next speaker to take the questions, or do you want to take them now?
You decide. I'm responding to one question in the chat, and I can stay after the next presenter as well, but then I will have to leave for another meeting. But so I can stay after the presenter from the Gambia if you prefer to do it together. Yes.
Yes, I think let's do it together. That way we'll be able to manage our time better if both speakers can speak one after the other. Thank you, Marianne.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Mrs. Tita Jata is, yes, thank you for the slides. She's the head of the gender unit and the senior director of in-service training and lifelong learning at the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education in the Gambia. And she comes to us as a distinguished gender specialist with decades of relevant experience. We're so happy to have her. Mrs. Jata, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. It's still morning, it's still afternoon now in the Gambia. Good afternoon to everybody. It's 1 o'clock here. Yes, I'm from the Gambia, and greetings from the Gambia. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the good practices that help augment the growth enrollment rates for girls, and also the retention for girls, and also how we were able to achieve quality to make sure that children attend school, stay in school, finish school, and come out with respectful results. So I'm going to bring out 3 examples. We have a lot of examples, but because of time, I'm going to bring out 3 examples. So what I'm going to talk about is the evidence-based good practices in the Gambia in achieving gender equity in education. The next slide. And by the way, I would like to thank Eva for giving me the opportunity to share what we have in the Gambia. And mind you, Gambia is a small country in West Africa with a population of just over 2 million people. Now, this is how my presentation outline is going to be. You know, the previous speaker talked a lot about the factors that affect girls' education in Africa. And I'll also talk about the interventions that we have done. And from the interventions, I will pick 3 good practices that we did that help improve the percentage of girls in school. And also I will talk a bit of the challenges that we've been experiencing when we are, doing implementing some of the interventions that we did as a country. The next slide, please. Yes, thank you very much. I think we all know that the previous speaker talked about it, that education is a basic human right. And it's in the international commitments, such as the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also the African Charter. It's also widely recognized that women and girls' education are one of the most effective means of development. And development of girls themselves, and also the communities, development of their communities. And also is a fact that better girls and women's education raises maternal health. I think the previous speaker talked about that. And reduces child mortality, improves nutrition within the household, and increases the potential workforce and opportunities for economic growth. Next slide, please. Now, we all know what was the focus on gender. I think it started, we all know that it started during the Beijing conference. That was 1995, when the conference came out with the platform of action. Then 5 years later, there was the Dakar framework of action. We came up with the education for all goals, especially goal 5, which emphasized the achievement of gender parity by 2005 and gender equality by 2015. And there was the Millennium Development Goals too, especially Goal 2, which talked about the achievement of universal basic education, primary education by 2015. The next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, within Africa, we had, I think we know about DEWA. That was the second decade for education in Africa, 2006 to 2015. And the commitment was to eliminate gender disparities and ensure gender equality and girls and women's empowerment through the education system. We also have the Constitution of the Gambia that enshrines education as a right. The next slide. Our education policy 2004-2015, the Children Acts of 2005, mandated free and compulsory basic education. The Act establishes the compulsory basic education as a law and assigns duties to government and parents, guardians to make sure that their children go to school, stay in school and finish school. And now what we are implementing is the Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 4, which focuses on quality education. And now our focus is our education policy 2016 to 2030, which also has the principles of education of the guiding principles of our policy, which should be non-discriminatory, respect for the rights of all, promotion of ethical norms and values, and culture of peace, and also the development of science and technology competencies for the desired quantum leap. Yes, that was these are the guiding principles of the education of our education policy. Now, we talked about the factors that used to affect the education of girls in the Gambia. A lot of researches were made because it was so poor that the percentages were in single digits in certain areas of the country. You have 4%, 8% of girls going to school. And now the researches were made, and it was found that one major factor was poverty. And in fact, even if there's minimal amount of money in the family, boys will be allowed to go to school, while girls will stay at home, even if the girls is doing better in school. And also you have the issue of male dominance, preferring boys than girls in the family, and girls, because boys are seen to be caretakers of the family, whereas girls are supposed to be taken care of. So the best person to go to school is the boy, not the girl. And I will not dwell more into child and early marriage because Quentin talked about it, and it's the same story in the Gambia. We also talked about early pregnancy, teenage pregnancy, that also was a factor. The distance to school, it affected upper primary, that is our upper basic level, and senior level. Because if you have to move from one village past two or three villages before you meet a senior secondary school, the issue of SDVB, safety of the girls. So parents would prefer to keep their children to schools. At home rather than allow them to go and finish. So it affected our secondary education a lot. The issue of school-related issues such as absenteeism during menstruation, that was a big problem. And girls will definitely stay at home when they are seeing their menses. Imagine staying at home between 3 to 5 days, and you are supposed to go to school for 20 days in the week. That was an issue, and a lot of girls will stay. Imagine 20 days a week, 20 days a month, and you stay from 3 to 5 days, calculate the number of hours, contact hours that's being lost. Domestic chores was also a problem. Girls will do all the household chores. We all know the situation in Africa, in most of our African countries. And as a result, by the time they arrive in school, they will be so tired, and concentration and all that will be a problem for them. So it affected the quality. And we also had the issue of the gender insensitive curriculum. That was also an issue because the curriculum, the way it was at that particular point in time, it was seeing the male gender as the overall controller of everything. You see, to portray an astronaut, you portray a man. To portray a head teacher, you portray a man. Then the ordinary teachers will be the women. The doctors will be men. The girls will be, nurses. So the curriculum and even the way of lesson delivery was so gender insensitive. Next slide. Next slide, please. Now the intervention made by Murphy. So because of the issue that a lot of girls drop out away, can somebody is the mic is on. Thank you. Because a lot of girls drop out on the way, but sometimes they will want to come back. A lot of them so interested in coming back. The Ministry of Education came with the re-entry policy for girls. This was the re-entry policy way back in 2004. And a lot of girls came back to school, and they were sponsored at that particular point in time. And I'm happy to tell you that some of the lawyers that we are seeing, the barristers, from this program. We also, some more senior secondary schools were constructed. Still, we don't have enough, but more of them were constructed. And scholarships, especially in the hardest areas, scholarships were provided for girls. So any girl that goes to school at the level of upper primary and senior secondary level were being sponsored, and they were sponsored throughout their education. Now in the Gambia, in fact, anybody who goes to our public schools are not are required to pay school fees because we have the school improvement grant, we call the SIG. And a lot of sensitizations were made at different levels, at the community level, parents, at the level of teachers, at the level of students, both boys and girls. And also with the help of UNICEF, curriculum audit was done, and the basic education curriculum was eventually gender sensitive. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. In addition, I'm just listing some of the interventions. We have more. There was this gender responsive pedagogy trainings for teachers, and it's done every year. I think Quentin talk about it, so we understand what it is. And this is an yearly activity, especially for newly qualified teachers. There was also the creation of mothers clubs, and they were also economically empowered. And these came with the help of the World Bank and also UNICEF. And one important thing, very important, was the provision of sanitary towels for girls. Next slide. Next slide, please. Now, from the interventions that we made, I took brought out 3 important good practices at the level of the ministry that help us boost the number of girls in school. It has also boost girls being retained in school, and it also boosts their performance. And those good practices are: 1, the provision of sanitary pads. I think I talk about the sanitary pads provision. And why we provided sanitary pads is because of the absenteeism and the large number or the high number of hours, contact hours being lost when girls see their menses. And also the creation of the scholarship trust fund for girls, and also the re-entry program for girls. Next slide, please. Now, the provision of sanitary pads for girls. Menstruation was a leading cause for female absenteeism in school. That was a fact that was established. And lack of sanitary pads, because many are too poor. If you are finding it difficult to provide the 3 daily meals, I don't think it will be, you would think about buying sanitary pads for your child. So what was being done was girls being given cloth, which was associated with poor hygiene. Why? Because, the issue of water is a problem in many of our communities. And so they prefer to stay at home while they are seeing their menses because they become very uncomfortable. They feel humiliated sometimes, and especially when they are discolored. And combining these facts, upper basic cycle. When I say upper basic, is the upper primary school and the senior secondary girls. Sometimes if they stay too much away from school, it results in dropout or low attendance. Also poor performance and also the low retention rates. So the beneficiaries of the provision of these sanitary pads include girls in upper basic cycle, senior secondary, as well as our school. All our schools are special needs schools. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at it, maybe the figures may look, especially when it was converted to US dollars, but we make sure that every girl in our, especially in the provinces where the economic the level of earnings is very low, all of them do benefit. And if you look at the figures, I just gave you a 3-year figure, that is from $45,000 to 1.3. While the amount is increasing every year, more girls are in school, more senior secondary schools are open. So that's why the amount is increasing every year. Next slide, please. Now, the scholarship trust fund for girls, initially I talked about the research and why girls are being left in school. Mostly it's economic. And so girls, we are sponsored to make sure that they stay in school, because our major important impediment for them to go to school, stay and finish, was poverty. And their parents will send their sons and leave girls at home. So this scholarship trust will help a lot in boosting. You will see it in the figures later. The next slide, please. Now, the re-entry program for girls. This was as a result of those children that had financial constraints, those who were pregnant, and those who were forcefully given away for marriage. And we have many of them. So the policy was a silent policy because Gambia is a religious country. You have Christians, Muslims. So it was a silent policy. And it was a direct response to the persistent gender gap in education. So the long-term impact could be seen as having few women in our leadership positions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Mr.
Yes,
Johnson, you have about 2 minutes left.
And yes, and the girls were admitted through the following. It was voluntary. Most of them came, and some were identified by teachers or the guidance counselors in the schools, or even community members, because a lot of sensitizations were made to inform people of the existence of the policy. And also parents will bring their children. Most of the parents brought their children. Next slide, please. And what was done for us to have that was the advocacy at the level of principals, because any child that is re-entered, because sometimes it's difficult for you to go back to your school that you were there before. So we ask them to choose the school of their choice, and that's where they go to. And principals also were sensitized to understand that if we have a child, of that nature, you should admit them, and you also have to make sure that they go to their education. So we have a lot of support from the principals and also from the communities. Now, because of these 3 major gender responsive practices that we did, I'm happy to show you now how our statistics are when it comes to girls as opposed to boys. Next slide, please. If you look in 2010, our total enrollment from grade 1 to grade 12, that is from primary education to senior level of education, was 339,000. but it has increased by over 200,000. The numbers may be very small, but I'm talking about the Gambia with a population of 2 million people. So look at where we are now. And if you look at the growth rate at lower basic level, you see that it's 7%. Upper basic level is 6.6%. The senior secondary level is 6.9%. And if you look at the cumulation as a country, the total is 6.9%. So the growth rate was very encouraging. The next slide, please. Next slide. Now, if you look at the GER, that is the gender enrollment rate, and you look at the gender parity index, you can see, you know, from 2017 to 2022, you can see how it is now as a country. That if you look at the GPI, we want it to be 1 anyway. You will see that you have more girls at all levels now than boys, percentage-wise, although we want it to be 1. Next slide, please. Thank you. I just want you to look at our gross intake rates, the gross enrollment rates, 2013 to 2023, you know, and you look at the gender parity index in 2023, you understand? And you look at the completion rates too, by level in 2013 and now 2023, you can see the issue. And if you look at the gender parity index too, the indicators will show you ECD still is 1.08 up to the senior secondary level. We have a lot of issues with the irregular migration, and you can see the senior secondary level now is 1.38. You know, this is not encouraging at all. The next slide, please. And the ministry is, you know, looking for ways and means. We are working on that to make sure that we have the boys in school and they stay in school. Now, yes, if we look at the ECD figures, because ECD is very important if we are supposed to, if we want to improve upon our quality, the performance levels at the end of the day, the achievement of both boys and girls. ECD is very important, but our numbers are still a bit low when it comes to ECD. In most cases, it's over 50%, but we want to have more ECD children in school. So that's one of our challenges, and the ministry knows about it, and we are working on that. And the secondary education completion is an issue still, because it's around the 50% if we look at the completion rate, and that also has to be, that also is another challenge. And other challenge is the issue of early marriage and child marriage. Still is an issue. Children are taken with all we have the child marriage law in the Gambia, we have the anti-FGM law, but still children are given away for marriage. So what we do as a ministry is for us to negotiate with families, and if they are becoming too difficult, we engage the Department of Social Welfare, who has the power and the mandate to take legal action against parents who give their children away from marriage. Another challenge is the indirect cost of education. Yes, girls are not paying school fees, boys are not paying school fees, they are not buying books, but shoes, uniforms, you know, bags are also issues, and also transportation to and from. Now, when we talk about the reaching the unreached, I did it 2 times. I'm sorry about that. The issue of reaching the unreached is the issue of the big majlises. We have them in the Gambia. I'm not talking about madrasa. Madrasa is the formal education system we have in the Gambia, but we have the majlises, and those are the big Quranic recitation centers. And you know, the issue of power struggle, you know, it's always very difficult to have the children in those school centers to come and do conventional, to come to the conventional education system. We still have issues about that. Regional directors are negotiated so that at least if they learn the Quran in the morning, they can go to school in the afternoon. Those are some of the challenges that we came out with to make sure that we have our children, especially girls, in our conventional education system. Now, another issue is the tertiary education for girls. We have encouraging numbers up to secondary level, but at the level of tertiary, they tend to disappear. And the unfortunate thing is, we have 2 ministries of education. It's the basic and secondary education, and also the tertiary education level. What is the Ministry of Tertiary Education doing to make sure that girls stay, girls attain, you know, that level of education? It's an issue. The two ministries in our interministerial are discussing these issues and look at, the most appropriate way to deal with this problem that we are having. And also we are having gas in STEM. The ministry, what the Minister of Basic and Secondary Education did when we have problems of girls education in the 90s, was to set up a girls education unit. And when the numbers started becoming encouraging, it was changed to a gender unit. And the unit is fully staffed. The head of the unit has the position of an assistant director under my directorate, and we're working hand in hand to make sure that issues of gender are dealt with. And the one important thing that the gender unit is doing is the mathematics and science clinic for girls. It's being done every year, and the effect has been seen in the exams that you have a lot of girls excelling in the sciences, because it's something that is very at the level of the country, is something that is very girls fear the math and science. This notion of science and mathematics is not for girls. So as a result, most of them. So because of the clinics now, they are starting to embrace it, and it's done. These clinics are being conducted at the level of the upper primary early, so we target them early. Next slide. I think this is the end of my presentation. Next slide. That is the end of my presentation. But just to talk about the role modeling thing, because as I told you earlier on, there are lots of programs that we have done at the level of the ministry, but I cannot talk about everything. But when I was listening to printing, it talked about teachers, and what we did to make sure that we have role models in our school is to have a RIFT program, and that is remedial initiative for female teachers at the Gambia College, so that a lot of women who had maybe not didn't reach didn't meet the number of credits to go to the college were admitted, and they were given remedial class. And in the end, in fact, they became better teachers than those with better results. So that's how we were able to get most of these female teachers, but still we don't have enough. But that's where we have most of these female teachers went to, and some of them are master's degree holders now in education. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so
Mrs. Jata,
much.
thank you so much. Oh yes, Mercy, over to you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. You can carry on, Marianne. Just give your thanks, and then I'll come in.
No, I was just saying to some people who had trouble hearing, they had maybe issues with the sound. We will make all the slides available and also the recording too. But that's all I wanted to say. And thank you, Mrs. Jata. Over to you, Mercy.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Jata. And also thank you to Quinton. Thank you so much for your presentations. I'm sure our participants have been engaging in the chat box, and they would like to ask you some questions. So I think my personal takeaway was I'm very interested to hear more about especially the reintegration of girls back into school. I noticed that you also said it's a voluntary program. So I'm wondering whether, as a voluntary program, do you think that it's reaching all the girls that dropped out or those that haven't managed to go to school? Do you have any plans of maybe reaching out to them as opposed to voluntary, or do you think voluntary works for now? And then to Quinton, thank you so much also for your presentation. I think one of my takeaways was when you spoke about a lot of things that we still need to unpack, but I found it interesting that you also spoke about how quality education is a strategy for retention. I think it's one of the things we did not explicitly talk about in the sessions that we sort of just implied as we were moving along, but I like the fact that you brought that point out. So for now, I will hand over, I'll open the floor, in fact, to our participants to ask our guest speakers any burning questions that they have. But in the meantime, maybe Mrs. Jatta, you can respond to my observation stroke question.
Okay, thank you very much, Marty. Yes, I think I was speaking a bit fast, so because I was conscious of the 15 minutes that was given to me. I'm sorry about that. Yes, the re-entry program, one of the ways that we get them is through voluntary. But if you look at the presentation, you will see that sometimes parents bring them in. Sometimes they were identified by teachers, because some very intelligent girls, sometimes they drop out. And teachers find it difficult, you know, to live with that. So they tend to scout them. And if they talk to them, and if they're interested to come, they bring them. Sometimes you have these community leaders, the mothers clubs. Sometimes they are the ones who also bring them. So voluntary is just one way we get them. We get them through the parents, we get them through the mothers club, we get them through the community members, we also get them through the teachers. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Jatta. I think one of the things that we are appreciating from the first session up to now, and even with our guest speakers today, is that the issue of primary and secondary education, and of both girls and education and boys education, is complex, because there are so many issues, some structural, some cultural, some religious, as you mentioned, that your policy was actually a silent policy because you are a deeply religious country. So it's about how we navigate around all those things. And also the participants were talking much earlier before you came about how we can get political will, you know, from our political leaders, as opposed to when they're just running for office, you know, so that they sustained political will. I noticed in your presentation that you also spoke about the issue of maybe the people in politics not wanting, they feel like they don't want to ruffle the feathers of the people that vote for them. So that's something that keeps coming up. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I just come in there for a minute? Yes. You are very. I'm sorry, timer. Can I, Mercy?
Yes. Please go ahead quickly.
Yes. Yeah. What you said is right. Political will for girls' education, even at the times during the times of the former government, with all the issues that they had, they were in for the education of the girl child, and they really supported, because the former policy was through was during the time of the former government. And right now, what we also have is the political will, and we also have Quentin was talking about our minister. Our minister used to be the head of the gender unit. You know, we have strong women who make sure that, you know, the issues of girls, you know, is always an issue when we hear at the level of the office that a girl is supposed to be taken away from marriage. You know the way the West Africa is. You have lots of Guineans around. You have lots of Senegalese around. You understand? You have lots of Malians around, because the way West Africa is. And sometimes they will marry you off and take you to another country. And what we normally done is, normally done is we engage Interpol with through the Department of Social Welfare. We engage Interpol to make sure that the child is brought back. And that is being done.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. Thank you so much. Maybe our participants may have questions for both Mrs. Jatta and for Dr. Quinton. Please, I'm not sure, Marianne, whether I'm missing any hands, but one of the things I wanted to pose to Quinton, because I saw that he also referred to the fact that he would be looking forward for our participants to share their country examples, just like Mrs. Jatta has done. But maybe what we need to clarify, and in case it's not clear, is whether we are looking for country examples that are evidence-based, or are we asking our participants to just talk about any examples that may not actually have written articles. Maybe we could start from there, and it could help our participants to start filling in the guidelines that we started. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond, Mercy?
Yes, please, Quinton, please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Right. So, I mean, the special request that I had on country examples is for the Africa Teachers Report on Girls' Education, right? We need to have some evidence, but that doesn't mean it has to be a published academic paper, right? So I mentioned the example of the Gambia, and so I want to showcase the fact that in the Gambia, they had these incentives for teachers to go to rural areas, and that was especially helpful to have women go to those areas, and that matters because that's where you need the role models, the female role models for the girls to remain in school, right? So that's one example. And there, I think they have data over time from the EMIS system that shows how many teachers were there, etc., and how many people picked up those benefits and so on. That's just one example, right? So there has to be some kind of data to show that it actually worked, but it doesn't have to be a published academic paper. It doesn't have to be a randomized controlled trial, none of that, right? Even beneficiary data, right? So gender responsive pedagogy. I mean, there are very few randomized controlled trials as far as I understand, but there's quite a bit of data that comes from either the teachers who were trained, sometimes even from the students, about how things may have changed, right? That's useful. I mean, my advice to you, if you're interested in sharing something, is share. I don't guarantee that everything that you will be sharing will be in the report, but the idea is that we will put a bunch of boxes with interesting experiences, and the more we have, the better, right? And several people have said in the chat, oh, but we do the same thing as the Gambia. That's great, right? But send it to us, and then we can refer to it as long as there is some level of data that shows that it worked. I think we can use it. Back to you, Mercy or Marianne.
Thank you so much, Quinton. That's very, very helpful. I'm sure our participants have heard that, and we also really want to thank you, our participant who got us in touch with Mrs. Tida Jata. So we are going to be following up for, I know you couldn't share everything that you have, and you still have more that you want to share. I'm also trying to look out for comments in the chat box. I know that, Quinton, you answered one of the first questions that was posed to you, I think, about the age of the girls. Participants, please feel free to put your hands up to engage with our guest speakers. They really bring with them a lot of experience, you know, ground experience, working in this in the different countries. So this is your opportunity for all the burning questions that you've had up to now. So please feel free to engage.
Hello, Mercy.
Yes, is that Petros? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. In relation to Quinton's presentation, yes, the many factors that he was raising were sweeping girls from schools so that it will expose them to poverty and related challenges ahead in life. So I totally agree. Early marriage, economic problems, fertility, these all things are affecting girls and women as well. So it's a comment for Quinton's presentation. But to the second presidency, I'm sorry for my poor internet connection. I was interrupted because of the on and off of the internet connection here. If I missed, I'm sorry. But my question is, I'm very happy that many girls are coming to school. Is it because working on girls' education or because boys are needed for social services here? Because in our country, there are community sections that wanted boys for the labor to look at the categories. If it is because of this fact, what is their plan that they are going to do to avert the situation? Because we need boys and girls to come to school as well, equally. That's how gender is. Thanks so much. If it's already said, I'm sorry.
Quinton, you can go ahead. I'm afraid to say I missed parts of the question. I don't know if you got it all. Did you also miss it?
Yeah, I couldn't understand. I'm really sorry. Is there a way to repeat the question in a shorter way and speaking a bit louder? I couldn't make out what was said.
Yeah, or even to type it in the chat box.
Petros, can you do that?
Yes, at the end, Petros is actually based in Ethiopia. He spoke about how it's important to have both girls and boys, but I missed the actual very important part of his comment stroke question. Do you want to take it again, Petros?
Thank you so much. There was a noise here with me, that's why. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
To contain, my suggestion is that it's true. The different factors, early marriage, economic related problems, and then all the factors he was raising were sweeping the girls from schools. They are taking away. Dropout is very high because of these factors. Just, I am agreeing with the presentations. In relation to the second presentation, I'm sorry if I missed the point, but why the boys are out now? Is it because their level is needed by the community, or because many girls are coming to school because of the efforts that the Zambians are doing? What is the factor? If it is already explained and I missed because of poor internet connection, I'm sorry. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Petros. Quinton, do you want to take that? I think, if I may be wrong, but I think...
What I understood from Petros is that he was agreeing with what I said. That's good. And then he had a question for Tida, which I didn't understand, actually. So the connection is poor. Petros, by the way, we should chat at some point, because Ethiopia is one of the countries where we are estimating all of what I explained in my presentation. So it would be good to have a chat about how you can use it at the ministry. But the question was for Tida and not for me, and I couldn't understand the question.
Yes, I think if I could pick Mercy, with your permission.
Please go ahead, Mrs. Chatham.
Yeah, if I could pick from what he said was the issue of having, the gender parity index being having more girls than boys, it should be equal. I think that is our aim as a ministry to make sure that the percentage is 50-50, not 51 or 54, 40 something. I think that is our aim, and we are working towards that. And I think I told you, at the level of the senior secondary, we have a lot of issues, especially on illegal migration of boys going out through the back way to Europe, and that has affected the percentage of boys, because it ranges from the ages of 17, 18, 19 when you are at the senior secondary level. And most of them are taking the back way to Europe, and a lot of them are leaving school and going through the back way. But what I also want to tell Petros also is that it's not only one intervention that is giving us these encouraging statistics. There are lots of interventions that we are doing, focusing on specific areas to make sure that we boost the statistics, that is number of both boys and girls in school. In fact, we used to have, now we have the SID, but we even used to go, when we are having the scholarship trust fund for girls, we are also having the scholarship for needy boys. We were having it so those needy boys also we are taking care of. And the incentive that Quinton talked about is the hardship allowances, is one of the incentives for those in the hard-to-reach areas. We also have incentives like the building of staff quarters for teachers, because we have problems of accommodation when they are posted. Also, female teachers who are ready to go and stay there were also given special allowances so that they will go in the provinces and they will stay and they will also equally serve as role models for girls. Because not having a female teacher in a school was a disincentive for parents to take their daughters to school. So what was being done was to make sure that these the giving incentive to the female teachers had a lot of effects, positive effects, not only for them to stay there, but they will serve as role models, and also girls will be in school and stay in school. I think I answered your question, Pedros. I don't know, Pedros, sorry.
Thank you so much. I got it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there's still anything unanswered, please feel free to write in the chat box, Petros. So I'm just going to read out a few questions that I'm seeing in the chat box. There's Betty Azati from Uganda. Thank you, Quinton, for the presentation. Ideally, primary education should give a little more benefits than what is emanating from the study. A few years ago, education was fronted as primary education was fronted as having more benefits. Do you think the quality of the current primary education could be affecting its benefits to girls? And then later on, Betty also said, given that majority of children do not access or proceed to secondary, would improving quality of learning or curriculum be a solution to enhancing benefits of primary education to girls? So this is addressed to Quinton. And then Innocent, also in Uganda, says, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Among other social factors that affect girls is the boy preference by majority of parents. And he also makes the observation that many parents look at girls' education as an expensive investment and yet not profitable. So yes, maybe Quinton, you can answer Betty's question for now.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, so I have my doubts about previous studies showing high returns to primary. I think that you need to not only do technically mean Serial regressions with the years of education, but you also need to do regressions where you have education by level, right? And when you do the second, and you compare the benefits of primary versus none, secondary versus none, and tertiary versus none, you see really in many countries that the benefits from primary are very low. The benefits from primary, and that relates to the question or the point that you made, Betty, about the quality. The benefits from primary comes from literacy. So if you, for example, do the analysis and apart from the usual variables, education, experience, and so on, you also put in the variable literacy, even though it is subjective literacy in the surveys. What you find is that the typical premium to primary, which is 20 or 30%, comes from literacy, right? And the others who go to primary and are not literate, even if that's subjectively declared, don't have any benefits. And that is the case for earnings, but it's the case for fertility, it's the case for under 5 mortality and under 5 stunting for the children of the girls. It's the case for almost everything, right? It may have changed over time, but I think that primary is just not enough, right? Now, whether increasing the quality of primary could increase those benefits, potentially. I think that the argument I just made about literacy points to that. I think there is a big difference also in the type of benefits, right? So I would expect, for example, a high quality primary education maybe to have more effect on things like health knowledge, say knowledge of HIV/AIDS, for example, right? Or things like potentially under 5 mortality and under 5 stunting, right? Given how labor markets work, and the whole issue of supply and demand, I'm not sure that increasing the quality of primary at this stage would have a lot of effect on the returns to primary in the labor market. So it depends a little bit what we are talking about. But indeed, I mean, the bottom line, the message I wanted to give actually is not to say primary doesn't matter. Of course, it's fundamental. But the message I wanted to give is that we actually need to improve learning in primary, and that would not only improve learning, but it would also improve educational attainment. And my former employer at the World Bank, we have this measure, which is called the learning adjusted years of schooling, which is how many years of schooling is a child expected to get, and then how much is that really worth in terms of learning adjusted years of schoolings, taking into account different quality in different countries of education systems. And that variable, the learning adjusted years of schooling, is what is typically used when you want to do a quick and dirty cost-benefit analysis. It really makes the point very clearly that both the number of years that you have and the quality of those years matter for returns. I mean, I don't know if that's a sufficient answer, but yes, I mean, so we need to improve primary, but we often need to go beyond to really start to reap the returns.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Quinton. I've gone through the chat box. I'm not seeing any more questions. Please feel free, maybe for another minute or two, to put up your hands and ask if you still have any questions. I just wanted to make an observation. You know, we were talking about we've been talking about intersectionality and intersecting structural issues and so forth. So I'm just thinking about how we need to also think about what education at the moment is really leading to, whether like how the youth view education, right? So in part of our literature review, even for this program, we were talking about the fact that in the next few years, out of a 12 million youth that are going to be either of an employable age or that have gone through school, only 3 million are going to actually be employed. So we need to start thinking about if the youth, and rightly so in many circumstances, if they are not seeing education as the road to a better life, right? As a road to getting basic needs, which is probably why Mrs. Jatta is saying that they are getting into boats and crossing to Europe. What does that actually mean? I mean, for the different governments, for the Ministry of Education, what do we do? How do we engage the youth? Or are we speaking to them to see what that means? We've also been talking, I think, right from session 1 about the issue of poverty keeps coming up, where going to school in some instances could mean life or death because of the rivers they have to navigate and so forth. I also liked Innocent's observation that I thought it was quite interesting that he said in certain communities, parents will see educating a girl child not having the benefit that they rationalize as important, right? Because they see that the girl is going to be married off. So I thought it was interesting what maybe us as development workers and governments see as the cost and the benefit, and what parents are seeing as the cost and the benefit. So how do we get to maybe have one conversation? I'll open that maybe to Quinton and to Mrs. Jatta as we wait for more comments.
I'm not sure I got the whole question, but I got the first part, which was, I mean, you mentioned the statistics, which I had trouble understanding, but then there's a broader point, which I think is correct on making sure that education is relevant. I mean, the statistics that 3 million youth would not be employed, I find that very surprising, because actually in Africa, most youth cannot afford not to be employed in some way. I mean, they might be self-employed, they might be in the formal market, but most youth actually do do work, especially when they start a family, right? They have no choice, frankly. This is why you actually typically have higher unemployment rate formally defined among people with higher education, because they come from well-off families typically, and so they can, between quote, afford to be unemployed. I mean, the poor and 80% of the population cannot afford it, right? So they work. But then the question is, what do they do? To me, this links to two things. I mean, we need to have an education system that is much more practically oriented, that provides actual skills that can be used in self-employment. I mean, in many African countries, the formal sector is 5–10% of the labor force. Most Jews are not going to get a job there. So we need to make sure that we provide skills, right, apart from the traditional education. And then what I find personally very useful, I mean, I'm a person who works always with numbers, right? But then I like stories and examples, because I think it makes things much more tangible. And there is one school, and some of you may have heard me mention this. It's in a small city in Burkina Faso. It's a Catholic school, so it doesn't matter. It has Muslim, Catholic, all kind of students. And the principal has done a wide range of very simple interventions at the school. One is to make sure that people from the business community are invited to the school, secondary school, and can present their work, etc. Another one, very simple, he created a business center in the school, and the students manage it. It's very small, and it would buy the furniture that they need, the materials that they need, and other things. When there is a festivity, they would organize it, and they would have stands to sell stuff. It's very, very basic, but it helps the kids to actually learn business. They have to hold accounts, and they have to be a bit entrepreneurial. There's a lot of things that can happen at the school level to promote that spirit of entrepreneurship in the context where we know that most of the youth will have to be self-employed. And that's another thing, by the way, that if you have examples of those things, right, we would love to hear from you. One of the things we started at TIGBA recently is a series of interviews, right? And for example, the last interview series we did was about 7 youth. We'll add 3 more who have done extraordinary things in service to others, right? And the series before that was with the winners of the African Continental Teacher Award. I mean, we would love to try to create some kind of platform on the web where we could share stories, we could share very practical examples apart from policy stuff that can inspire people to do the same things, right? And so if you are interested, again, in your country to work with us on that, we can do that, right? To try to get very hands-on experiences from the school level up in your countries, and sharing those inspiring actions that some people do. Yeah, back to you. I don't know if I answered, but back to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, you did a lot. Thank you so much, Quinton. Maybe some last words from Mrs. Jatta.
Yes, I just want to take it from where Quinton left it. And at the level of the ministry, we are in cognizance of the fact that we need to do something to make sure that education is more relevant for our children. So at the level of senior secondary school now, even before senior secondary, at the level of primary education, we are trying to target them when they are young. We are having vocational and technical education. You know, at the moment, we are reviewing our policy, and we find it very important to get free vocational and technical education for children at the level of primary education. Notwithstanding, we also look at the syllabus that is leading to the WAS examination, that is the end of senior secondary school, and it was reorganized to the extent that now you can be purely technical student if you want to be, or you can be in the other areas. So that at least at the end of your senior secondary level, you are not looking at somebody to employ you maybe by the time you finish, but you can go also into apprenticeship, gain some skills, and also be able to be self-employed, and in addition, employ others. Because this is an issue. In addition to that, also, we are working with the Ministry of Youth and Sports in fact, they're also developing their policy at the level, at the moment. And two of the Minister of Education staff are working with the Minister of Youth to make sure that our policy speak to each other, and so that at least the issue of employability at the end of the day will be taken care of. One last comment that I want to talk about, just 30 seconds, is the issue of the gas mine off. It's no longer an issue in the Gambia, the male child dominance that we used to have, because there's a lot of sensitization, and you will see an old man in the village who will tell you that I wish my older children are daughters, not sons, because of the way girls are taking care of the parents. You know, girls will definitely be more concerned for their parents than boys who are taking care of somebody else at home. So these are issues we are trying to desensitize them, systematically desensitize them on the beliefs that they had, you know, on girls' education. And it's really working. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Cheta. Thank you. Marianne, I see, I haven't seen any other questions. So now I'm looking at the time and wondering whether we should go into the chat rooms, or into the Zoom breakout rooms, or should we ask if people still have more time? Maybe I'll hand over to you.
Mercy, I think that for the sake of time, since we've already had about 5 people drop off in the last few minutes, I think because maybe they didn't have time, maybe we could just ask the group if they have any comments here in the main room about the reading that we gave them. We gave them 2 policy briefs on Kenya and Uganda, the link between gender inequality and national wealth, and then the summary of the longer report on the cost of not educating girls. So that was the required or recommended reading. And maybe they can just comment here in this main room instead of going to breakaway rooms, which would take longer. What do you think?
Yes, yes. Thanks, Marianne. That sounds like a great idea. So it would be good to hear from our participants if they manage to get through. We've shared 2 policy briefs, 3 pages each, which we thought were quite manageable. You could browse through on Kenya and Uganda, and the introduction to the article on the high cost of not educating girls, which was about 7 pages. So maybe now is a good time to find out if you have any questions from those policy briefs, or maybe your ideas on the findings. We are interested, especially from hearing from people with countries like Kenya and Uganda, whether you agree that what you see written in these articles represents your experiences on the ground in different countries, or do you have different experiences in the different contexts? I see. Thank you so much, Quinton. Maybe he's already gone. He's said his goodbyes in the chat box. He says he needs to go, but he remains available for any questions later. So if our participants can think of any more questions that you would like Quinton to answer, he is available. But we really, really thank him very much for his for an engaging presentation. Would anyone like to comment on the policy briefs? Did anyone manage to browse through any of the policy briefs? maybe what we can do, I'm not sure who's helping with the screen. Would like to go to back to the slides while I'm also checking the responses. Innocent says he did not read the policy brief, but his colleague Rossetti can say something. So this would be on the one from Uganda. Okay. So if we go to another slide, you find that there is a link there to the Uganda, not this one. Let's try the next one, the third one. There is a link to the Ugandan policy brief. We can open it so long while we are hearing from Ms. Rossetti. Would you like to share your views on the policy brief we shared? While we are getting the policy brief up on the screen. Yes, this one. Innocent, is Miss Rossetti here with us today? Hi, Innocent, can you hear me? Thank you so much, Mrs. Jata. We really welcome. We are really thankful for you to taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to come share with us. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We see that you have to run now. We'll be in touch with you if we need more information, but thank you so much.
Mercy, can I reply?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
As I understand from those materials, it's all about countries' wells, and among the different sources of wells, human capital outweighs all the others. And indeed, the contribution of men and women equally can help countries to maximize their national wealth. So, as Fontaine was explaining in different materials, the share of girls, their earnings is lower than the men. This is kind of imbalance that we need to work for the humans. Not so much. If I'm clear.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Was that Petros?
Yeah, you got my point.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. Any more comments? I see we have 3 new messages. Let me see. Okay, does anyone else want to comment on the Ugandan policy brief, or should we move to the Kenyan one? I will need the font to be a bit bigger for me to be able to read. Is it Gabriel that's helping us? Yes, thank you. So from what we can see, the key findings speak exactly to what Quinton also took us through in his presentation, where he was showing us how they calculate a country's wealth in terms of assets, human capital. And I think the main point is that's really being driven home is if women are not developed as part of human capital, this has not only an impact on their own earnings, but it has an impact on the earnings of a country as a whole. And then, of course, because of globalization, right, we don't live in a vacuum anymore. when there are impacts at national level, there are also impacts at global level, as Mrs. Jatta was also just telling us now about the issue of our youth and other people trying to migrate overseas for better opportunities. So in some cases, you find that the failure to develop people as part of human capital will also lead to their migration, as our speakers were talking about. So if there's no one else who wants to share anything in particular, we were hoping to hear from those residents in different countries. If you have any input that speaks to what we are reading here, or even if it's different, if you feel that these projections or these results don't speak to what you see on the ground, that would also be welcome. We can move to the Kenyan one, if possible. I know that we have some colleagues from Kenya today. Yes, at the bottom there, you could even go to the one you opened just now, the one that was written by Quinton. Yeah, we can also look at this one. Yeah, maybe if you can enlarge it a little bit, yes. Yes, please keep going down until we get to, yes, so where it says key findings by domain, right? You notice that the key terms we gave at the beginning were, for example, earnings and standard of living. So under earnings and standard of living, you see that here the article says women with primary education, partial or completed, earn only 14 to 19% more than those with no education. So by contrast, women with secondary education may expect to make almost twice as much, right? And secondary and tertiary education are also associated with higher labor force participation and especially full-time work. So what you can get from these key terms and key findings that we wanted to share, that also Quinton, our guest speaker, spoke about, but also he couldn't dwell on each of these. But the idea here is to show, especially in terms of themes, what are the impacts, what are the benefits. So if we look at earnings and standard of living, what we are getting from here is that from primary to secondary to tertiary education, the higher you go up, the more likely your earnings get higher and the more likely you are to participate in the labor force. So if we look at child marriage and early childbearing, you see here that it says each additional year of secondary education is associated with lower risks of marrying as a child and having a child before the age of 18 by 6 percentage points on average. So if universal secondary education was achieved, child marriage could be virtually eliminated and the prevalence of early childbearing could be reduced by up to 3/4 since early childbearing goes hand in hand with child marriage. So I'm only going, because of time, I'm only going to speak on these 2 points, but I'm speaking on these 2 points just to demonstrate to you that when you are now alone and you are looking at that case study, really what those themes or those terms are, they are making projections for us to see between the cost and the benefit. What I would like to ask our participants before we go is whether they actually agree, for example, with this projection we have, with this statement that's being made here. Do you agree that if universal secondary education were to be achieved, it could virtually eliminate child marriage or the prevalence of early childbearing? Is this something you think is closer to the truth, or in your particular context, do you think that if girls still went to secondary education, they would still maybe be disturbed by early marriage or early childbirth? I really would love to hear what you think.
Petros, can I speak?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I totally agree, because it minimizes the exposure of these girls who are under 18 to marriage, because they focus on education. All the things in school will be supportive and against early marriage. So I agree, because inequality in education will lead to inequality in economy. Girls' education is not about individual girls' issue; it's about nation building. I agree totally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other comments?
Can I speak, Missy?
Yes. Who's speaking?
Matsidiso.
Oh, Matsidiso, please come in.
Yes, I agree that the achievement of universal secondary education will help to eliminate early marriage of girls, because they will be focused in schools learning. Unlike when they are not schooling, they will not have something to be busy on. So they end up being engaged with boys, hence early marriage at an early stage, yes, which will lead up to childbearing at early ages. School will help them to be busy. I think so.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Metsidi. So we also have Alpha, right? Alpha Bar, please tell us which country you are speaking from, and you can mute yourself and speak.
Yes, I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, I think this is a very good life for some of us who are fourth generation who from the village and went to school with our colleagues, ladies. You could see in the late 90s and 80s, all the girls got married, but nowadays, all the girls are getting married after 30 years because they have to go to university. So it is a complete change now. They used to get married before 18, around 18. Now they are almost getting married after university when they are already in college or when they are already in university. So education is one way of keeping them definitely from getting married. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Alpha. You said, what country are you from? Okay, he didn't hear me. Miss Pumsle, please.
He's from the Gambia.
Oh, the Gambia. Oh, so much. Thank you. Miss Pumsle, you can speak after Miss Pumsle. We can have Dr. Effie. After Dr. Effie, we can have Miss Phyllis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm in full agreement that if universal secondary education were achieved, child marriage could be eliminated. I'll give you an example of the COVID situation, COVID-19 that we had in the country and all over the world. It was a global problem. But for us, especially in Eswatini, we've seen an increase in girls falling pregnant. just because they were not in school. And that is a clear indication that keeping them in school will, there would be no childbearing, early childbearing. And also we've seen them being married to men. I don't know what to call it, early marriages or child marriages. Just because of COVID, what we're seeing happening, I'm just giving an example actually to say these statements are true for us, where now you find that especially girls were affected and parents lost jobs, and then girls had to had to find ways of living, getting money, and kind of prostitution. This is the case, especially in our country, where you see them as you know that indeed, if they were kept in school, because most of actually the most active age, it's for us, what we are seeing, the pregnancies is between as early as 13 up to 18. So I can attest to that. Indeed, if we keep them longer in school, would have achieved universal secondary education. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And our next speakers are Dr. Effie and also Ms. Phyllis. If you can give us your comments and also maybe just add what your takeaway from today has been, that would really welcome that. Please go ahead, Dr. Effie.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really opportune to be in this meeting. I want to say that universal secondary education will be an answer to the problem of early marriage. Because by the time a child gets secondary education, the child would have developed some skills, life skills, and would be better exposed to take profitable decisions that will guide her actions. For instance, the child will not be deceived way out of early marriage. So this, I think, it's a positive effort. It will be a positive effort. It will really help the children to navigate positively out of child marriage and early pregnancy. The child is better able to take decisions. The child is better able to understand his reason or the action or her actions. The child is better able to, judge her actions. No, why am I doing this? Will this end up well with me? That exposure of secondary education is very important in the life of an adolescent girl. So I think that is I think it is a positive trend. Then too, what I have learned from this workshop is that there are certain interventions that could really help to bring about gender parity in our various countries. For instance, in Nigeria, we have a lot. We have done the HILWA, that is high-level women advocates, who are like role models. We have had, and I think Nigeria has made tremendous success to some extent, but we're not there yet, but we're not where we used to be. So I think I have learned that there are certain interventions. I was taking down notes that there are certain interventions that, for instance, Gambia, because that's where I met the meeting, there are certain interventions like the Maths and Science Club that was handled under the gender unit that fascinated me. Apart from that too, there's also the re-entry guidelines, which we in Nigeria are also doing. It is actually going in for approval at the NCE, which is the highest policy-making body in Nigeria in terms of education. So I think we're learning. This exercise is an eye-opener for me as a gender desk officer. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Effie. We really value your input, your comments, as well as your takeaway for the day. Miss Phyllis, would you like to go ahead? Your hand was up, maybe to tell us, to answer us. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and just to give us your takeaway from today's session as well, if you may.
Yes, thank you. I come from Kenya, and the case, the brief is quite resonating with what is around. That we have a number of challenges that we are grappling with as far as the girls' education is concerned, and actually the issues of early childbearing and the marriage is for a fact an issue of concern that is preventing the actual realization of our girls' education in about. But good news is that the education sector in the Ministry of Education Kenya is seeing the challenge, and the government, along with the civil society organizations, have been working together to address these issues through policy reforms, awareness campaigns, and the targeted programs. Like I shared, we have a number of interventions that happen, including some of which Namibia have been implementing. And this will go a long way in promoting gender equality, and eventually our women's empowerment. Having said that, it is very true that education, any additional year, like our able facilitator has been telling us, any additional year that a girl stays in school helps in delaying the challenge of child marriage and childbearing. And yeah, I would actually concur that in addition to what we're saying, that being in school increases the girls' knowledge, skills, and also the ability to make decisions. They are informed, to make also informed choices in life, including marriage, including childbearing, and even as they grow up, they are able to also have interventions that have to do with reproductive health matters and the services and all that. So it is true, it can go a long way to reducing the risk of early and unplanned early marriages and unplanned pregnancies. Again, we are aware that education would also go a long way to making the society to be, the educated in a way that even in the future they will be able to consider education of their children, and therefore by and large break the cycle of poverty. And therefore girls who complete secondary education, of course, will be more likely to have a greater economic opportunities, and reduce that urge or that ignorance of early marriage and child bearing. So I think it is quite true. I can concur, and for sure education will help delay marriage and make those informed choices. Again, we know that when we are in school, we find that the school environment, the school community does provide supportive mechanisms for the girl child through mentorship programs, through the mentorship of the teachers and the peer support and all that. So all this will go a long way to giving the girl, even eventually, even when in school and even as they navigate through their education journey, they'll be able to get enough support to make informed choices, decisions, and also that support mechanism, which is very important. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. How about your takeaway from today? Is that, do you think that it's also encapsulated in the comment you just gave?
Yeah, I would, that we realize that the collaboration, the intersectionality of these matters, education, gender, and the challenges therein cannot be handled maybe with one intervention. We need to be able to combine a number of approaches to totally be able to speak to this issue of gender challenge. And therefore, I would, just like my colleague said, I would really call for that kind of intersectionality in addressing these matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your comment, Ms. Phyllis. I see Neo has shared a document, but I'm not sure what it is about. Would you like to tell us what the document you are sharing is about? Neo Gladys. Okay, maybe she's she can't hear us. So as you can see, our time, our engagement with our guest speakers was, I think, quite productive and quite intensive, so much that we have run over time, but also some of our participants joined in quite late today. But we really appreciate and thank everyone. So before I hand over to Marianne, I just wanna talk about the GEP tool that was shared last week. It was our hope that we would be able to look at the tool today if there was time. And then we were also going to ask participants, especially Miss Anne from Kenya, I'm not sure if she is online today, to stay behind and we can look at the tool together, maybe for about 10-15 minutes after everyone leaves, because we are aware that it's quite an intensive tool and we don't have time during the sessions to do so. So while I have the mic, I just want to introduce to the next session, which also happens to be our last session. So session 6, we are going to be identifying strategies and stakeholders and alliances to prioritize gender equity in education, especially in our own environments of policy-making context where we are finding ourselves. So if you are one of the curious ones, you might have seen that I already put up in the resource folder, session 6, and some reading materials and some slides are already in there for your perusal if you would like. I want to also just highlight that there's a survey. I'm not sure whether we've published it yet, but there is a survey that I created based on last week's session. I'm going to create a few more for each session, and they will take you maybe just about 8 to 10 minutes for you to complete. I think the best way probably is to give you a few days after we conclude the sessions, maybe about 3 to 5 working days, where you can just complete surveys from session 1, session 2. It's really just interactive and a way of making you remember some of the key terms that were that we grappled with, and some which also brought humor to us. In the first session, we're talking about who can grow a beard, who cannot, what does that mean in terms of productive work, reproductive work. So it's just those, and you have the slides with you also to remind yourself. So it's more of a reminder than anything. If there's anything I've forgotten, maybe I'll hand over to my colleague, Marianne now. She can finish off and give you some more insights on what's coming. Thank you.
Mercy, you did a great job. I don't really have much more to say. I'm just so impressed by the discussion we had today. And this is a good example of sometimes as a teacher, I have a teaching background. Many of us are teachers. Sometimes when the discussion is going well and the people are learning, you don't want to follow your plan anymore. You want to let things happen organically and let the participants have that space to learn on their time.
Yeah.
So today was a good example, I think, of that. We had some things planned like breakaway rooms and activities, but we didn't get to them. However, as Mercy says, if anybody wants to stay back for 10, 15 minutes to learn more about that tool that she mentioned, perhaps we can do that now. Maybe not a lot of time, but we have a little time to help anyone with the gender equality snapshot tool. The tool is the one that was shared last Thursday by our colleagues from the United Nations Girls Education Initiative, that shows the indicators and the data sets that you can use to measure gender equality in your countries. So it's a really great resource. We might do another workshop on it in January or February. We're still figuring out your needs and your interests. But if you want to have a quick look at it right now, you can stay back for maybe 10 minutes right now after this meeting ends. Otherwise, we'll be sharing the follow-up from today in an email with you soon after this. And please take the survey right now. It's just 3 to 5 minutes of your time. Tell us what you learned today. Tell us what feedback you have on today's session. And there are some important links in the chat box. If you miss any sessions or if you miss most of a session, we'd like you to make it up. And you can do that by watching the recording and seeing the PowerPoint slides. Everything is in the resource pack folder. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Mercy, that's it from my side. I'd like it if you were to give the final word and maybe any next steps in addition.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Marian. I was hoping that you'd mention I think session 6, we are also going to be working on what you are expecting them to do over the holidays, or was that what you covered at the beginning? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes, but actually that's a good point because many people who are here now were not in the beginning of the session. So if you want, I could go over that again in 2 minutes.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so participants, as has been said before, this is a short course, but it doesn't stop with the workshops that we're having on this week and Thursday. There's a learning task that we'd like you to do. It's a practical application task, and it will be due in January after the winter holiday break. I'll share my screen to show you what it looks like, and I'll also send you this assignment via email and WhatsApp, as well as email and WhatsApp. Let me just go over it very quickly with you, since many of you did not see it before. This is going to be a practical short task, and it is required if you would like to earn certificates through this course. There are some required tasks other than just coming and taking part in a wonderful discussion and sharing in those discussions. So that's, of course, part of it. But in addition, there are some short assignments. So this is an assignment that you need to do if you want to get a certificate. And this is going to be due on January 10th of next year. It is to create a professional action plan that summarizes your commitments to prioritize gender responsiveness in your departments and your regular work agenda in 2024, as well as strategies and partners that will help you to do so. You have to download the form and fill it in like a worksheet and then send it back to us. It's very short, it's not difficult, but it will be reflective and pragmatic for you. So here it is. You have to put down your name, your job description or your designation, department, institution, and your country here at the top. And the tip here is to identify just a few achievable actions, not 10 or 12, not ones that are going to be requiring lots of money and years and years and years of planning and consultations, but what can you do right now? What is achievable for you in your own work in 2024 in your area of immediate responsibility? So you have to be clear, be specific, and be realistic. How will you commit to doing something related to gender equity in your own area of responsibility? Are you going to, for example, hold a meeting with your supervisors, maybe your minister or your principal secretary, about what you have learned about gender equity and gender responsive education? Are you going to be sharing some of the presentations from this short course and then elaborating on it and making a case to your principal secretary or your minister about why they should adopt a certain program that maybe another country is doing? Are you going to organize a training, maybe for others in your ministry who are not as familiar as you are now about any of the concepts that we've discussed in these six classes? Do you want to organize a training at any level in your country? Do you want to conduct interviews with practitioners who are currently engaging in programs that you want to learn more about to get a better idea of what's happening? What is the picture of gender equity in your country? These are just three very simple, quick examples, but you need to think about what is it that you can do. It can be one thing, it can be two things. It shouldn't be 15 too many different things, because unless you have that kind of work already in your work plan, it's hard to do a lot of things when it's new for us. So better just to go start small, pick one or two achievable actions that you can see yourself completing sometime next year, maybe early next year in the first quarter. So I'll be sharing this with you via email and WhatsApp, but you have to simply respond to these prompts here in this box below. And it's going to take you through some questions about what will you be doing next year? How will you be in some way integrating gender responsiveness into your work that you normally do? This is not meant to be extra, it's meant to be complementary to what you're already doing. Okay, and this will be due on January 10th, except for this last column here. This you can do later on after you complete your action. So this professional action plan will be due on January 10th of next year and is required if you are aiming to get a certificate for this course, which we hope that you do, because even if you haven't been able to attend all these workshops, you can still take part by watching the recording and looking at the slides that we share with you. You can still earn your participation. And if you haven't already seen this as well, by this Thursday, the last workshop, this worksheet is required. We've asked you to please share an example from your country of a program, a gender responsive program. So this was talked about several sessions back. We've only received 2 so far from South Sudan and South Africa. So we're looking to get more. This is going to be a basic assignment for you in order to prepare for something like the action plan. So this is also required, and you'll have to do this by Thursday of this week. Unless you have some emergency that prevents you from doing it, we expect to get a lot of submissions before Thursday. Mercy, back over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marianne. I think thank you so much to our participants. I really, really want to thank our participants. We've been very consistent. They've kept coming. They've asked questions, made comments, observations, and they've also, generated a lot of talk and contribution, which we think is going to help us shape our community of practice. So speaking about next week, session 6, it would be helpful. We will be in touch with our participants, but what would be helpful is for our participants to go and think about the strategies that they may use, or they have already been using in terms of identifying stakeholders, and also for making sure that they entrench gender equality and equity in education. And I'm actually thinking that maybe Mrs. Jatta would have been a very good person to also ask about that, because she's been in the ministry for a long time. So she might have some pointers on strategies and stakeholders and how they identify stakeholders. So that's all for next week. But for now, goodbye and thank you very, very much. If there is anyone who's remaining behind because they want any questions answered, please indicate so that we know. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Bye, Petros. Thank you so much for all your engagements. We appreciate.